Hi everyone, welcome back to Note to Shelf. As you can see, it's a bit of a different setup today. I finally got my new desk. Well, it's actually, you could probably see it's a loft bed with a built-in desk with it, to help save space because we're in such a small room. It's just me. Just me. Anyway, for today's video, I wanted to try doing a reading vlog for the Song of Achilles and Circe, both by Madeline Miller. A little bit of context. My sister has gotten me hooked on Epic the Musical. Um, and I've always enjoyed Greek mythology. This musical has reignited that interest in me. And, being on BookTube as a viewer for a while now, I've heard of these books and have been wanting to read them. But, I haven't gotten around to doing it. But I finally have the books. And like I said, since getting into the musical, it's kind of like, oh, I want to read it. I want to read it now. And now that I have my own YouTube channel, I thought it would be fun to read along with you. Just so you know, this video will contain spoilers for both of the books. So if you haven't read it yet, like me, and you don't want spoilers, you can click off the video. It is okay. Come back when you're ready. But yeah, so I will get started on that and check in with you later. First up, I'm going to read The Song of Achilles. I got this nice version at Walmart. That's what they had. Um, and it's got the sprayed edges with all the different Greek symbols, which I think is really cool. It's got a quote on the back. We were like gods at the dawning of the world, and our joy was so bright we could see nothing else but the other. That's intriguing. Let's read the summary. A thrilling, profoundly moving, and utterly unique retelling of the legend of Achilles and the Trojan War from the best-selling author of Circe. A tale of gods and goddesses, kings and queens, immortal fame, and the human heart. Achilles, the best of the Greeks, son of the cruel sea goddess Thetis and the legendary king Peleus, is strong, swift, and beautiful, irresistible to all who meet him. Patroclus is an awkward young prince, exiled from his homeland after an act of shocking violence. Brought together by chance, they forge an inseparable bond despite risking the god's wrath. They are trained by the centaur Chiron in the arts of war and medicine. But when word comes that Helen of Sparta has been kidnapped, all the heroes of Greece are called upon to lay siege to Troy in her name. Seduced by the promise of a glorious destiny, Achilles joins their cause, and, torn between love and fear for his friend, Patroclus follows. Little do they know that the cruel fates will test them both as never before and demand a terrible sacrifice. I've heard that this book is sad, and I don't know if I'm ready for that, but I'm gonna have to be. So yeah, here we go. Wish me luck. No, not bees. That's not what I want to think about when I'm kissing someone. Okay, so I just got to about 25% of the way through the book, and so far I'm definitely liking it. So I've read the first 9 chapters so far, and if you think about it, not a lot has happened plot wise. It's really focusing on how Achilles and Patroclus, how they become friends and how they grow closer over the years. And that's the thing too, these 9 chapters take place over years. There's like time skip, like not exactly skipping time, but skimming time. Kind of like a montage, basically, of their life. For the reader, it's like a few, like maybe a chapter or two, but for them, it's been like 2 or 3 years. But I find that it doesn't feel rushed. I don't feel like we're skipping too much. It's enough to not feel like, okay, when are we gonna get to something more exciting? We've been given just enough, and we're like kind of just now coming to more exciting things, I suspect. And when it comes to their relationship, they seem to hit it off right away. And so there's definitely that kind of instant attraction between them. But like, oh, I find you interesting, I want to be your friend. Or like, oh, you don't seem to be, snobby like other princes are. You actually seem nice. So it's like, okay, I'll be your friend. So while they have like this instant friendship, it doesn't feel like insta love, which I'm grateful for. I finally finished The Song of Achilles, and it was good. Um, I will say I don't think I felt as strongly as other people might have. I know at the beginning I mentioned how I heard that this was a sad book, and it is. It's a very tragic story. But I think what quote unquote ruined it for me was the fact that I already knew how it was going to end. I already knew that, our two main characters were going to die. It was just a matter of how they were going to get there. If I hadn't have known that, I probably would have felt more strongly about it. I will say, however, that what did stick out to me were some of the emotions and like character traits leading up to the climax, particularly pride in the form of Agamemnon and Achilles. Throughout the whole war section of the book, he is the general leader of all the Greeks for this war. And with Achilles being named the best of the Greeks, I think Agamemnon feels threatened, like he feels like his authority is threatened because everybody else has claimed their loyalty to Agamemnon except for Achilles. Achilles is like, I'm here because I chose to help you, not because I have to be here. And that kind of rubs him the wrong way. So, like, he ends up doing things and not backing down, even though backing down would help the army. There's a part where, he had angered the god Apollo, so now a plague is spreading throughout the troops. But he refuses to appease Apollo the way that he should because of his pride. And so at this point, Achilles confronts him on that. You are too prideful, you are hurting the troops, right? And this angers Agamemnon to the point where he takes away one of Achilles' war prizes to kind of like take away his honor. And this offends Achilles to the point where he's like, okay, I'm not going to fight with you guys anymore. Like, good luck fighting the Trojans without me. And, at first, it seems like fair enough, but then he also gets to a point where he refuses to help out again because Agamemnon won't come and apologize to him. And so now that the Greeks are losing terribly, like the Trojans are right outside their door, he's still refusing to help. Even when Odysseus and the others come, hey, like, you were right, we need your help, please help us. Like, even then, oh, and they even returned the war prize. It was one of the girls, Briseis, but even then, it's not enough for Achilles. He wants a direct apology. Like I said, at this point, the Trojans are cornering the Greeks against the beach. It's like if they burn down the ships, the Greeks are never going to be able to go home again. And even Patroclus is like, hey, things are really serious. Can you please help them out? Even then, like, that's the one thing he won't budge on. He's so blinded by his pride and so set on becoming a legend. He ends up doing a very similar thing to Agamemnon, like they're two sides of the same coin or something. It's not until Patroclus suggests that he dress up in Achilles' armor so that, they can like scare the Trojans enough to help the Greeks fight back, even if Achilles himself won't actually fight. And he reluctantly agrees to that. Maybe it's just me, but I feel like if my lover was like, fine, then I'll pretend to be you. I will go into the battlefield despite the fact I'm not nearly as good as a fighter as the others. Like I will go out there and pretend to be you. If it were me, I'd be like, wait, no, don't do that. I changed my mind. I will go out. Like if you're that desperate, like I will go out instead. But he agrees to it. And I know in the moment it might sound like a good solution because it's like, we get to push the Trojans back, but then you don't have to fight and tarnish your honor. Of course, maybe because this is mentioned in the story, like how the Greeks, they pride themselves on their honor. That's a big thing for the Greeks. And so maybe I just don't understand that. I don't think honor is as big of a thing for me. So maybe I'm just not understanding. But either way, with everything that happens, it makes me wonder if Patroclus would have lived if Achilles wasn't so prideful. I feel like it got to a point where it was like a little overkill. And at that point, it's like, forget about your pride, people are dying here. Like, even Patroclus himself, like, he himself wasn't prideful, but he was so devoted to Achilles. I feel like Achilles' pride became his pride in a sense. And like, to be fair, like the reason that Patroclus goes out as Achilles is because he wants to help the Greek army, these soldiers who he has come to know and care for. That's where his heart was. But even once he was on the battlefield pretending to be Achilles, it was like, I want to make Achilles look even greater. Almost like Achilles' pride rubbed off on Patroclus through, his devotion for him. And I think that caused Patroclus to make certain decisions that he wouldn't have normally. Because even like Achilles was like, you can't like go out there, pretend to be me, but like don't actually fight or anything like that. But Patroclus, like once he's out there, he's like, I'm going to fight. And then, he even goes so far as to attempt to climb the walls of the city Troy. He's like, I'm going to go into the city and I'm going to kill the king, end the war as Achilles. And I think if he had been more cautious and not done that, like maybe gone back to Achilles and then later let Achilles do that, like maybe he would have lived. It makes me think like if they made different choices, maybe things wouldn't have turned out the way that they did. However, then I remember that their deaths were foretold by the fates. Like they were told a long time ago that they were going to die. So then that just makes me think like maybe they would have died anyway, even if they had made different decisions or seemingly better decisions, maybe they still would have died. Like maybe it would have been in a different way, but like in the end, they die. Or maybe they were always destined to make those exact same choices. And then that leads into more wondering of like, are our choices our own to make? I think those are really all my thoughts I have for the Song of Achilles. I may not have cried because of how sad it was, but it was still a very well written book and a very good story. Nonetheless, next up I will be reading Circe. I will go ahead and read the back summary. In the house of Helios, god of the sun and the mightiest of the Titans, a daughter is born. But Circe is a strange child, not powerful like her father, nor viciously alluring like her mother. Turning to the world of mortals for companionship, she discovers that she does possess power, the power of witchcraft, which can transform rivals into monsters and menace the gods themselves. Threatened, Zeus banishes Circe to a deserted island where she hones her occult craft and crosses paths with many of the most famous figures in all of mythology, including the Minotaur, Daedalus and his doomed son Icarus, the murderous Medea, and of course wily Odysseus. But there is danger, too, for a woman who stands alone, and Circe unwittingly draws the wrath of both men and gods, ultimately finding herself pitted against one of the most terrifying and vengeful of the Olympians. To protect what she holds dear, Circe must summon her strength and choose, once and for all, whether she belongs with the gods she is born from or the mortals she has come to love. Yeah, so definitely excited to get into this one, and I will check in with you guys later. Oh, right, it's paperback. Okay, 25% of the way through Circe, and I think we've had some pretty good build up so far. I feel like it was similar to in the Song of Achilles. At this point in the story, I felt like it had fairly good pacing and was building up. And like you can tell that from this point on, bigger things are gonna start happening, and I'm excited for it. But yeah, so Circe has discovered her powers, her witchcraft powers, and is now being exiled from her home to an abandoned island. It turns out to be more of a blessing in disguise, because now she's free to be herself and to experiment with her new powers without prying eyes. And I'm glad that she was able to get away from her old environment. Like, she's surrounded by so many family members, but none of them seem to care, really. Like, even her younger brother, who they had a very close relationship with, even he eventually left her and seems to be more focused on himself. Yeah, I can just imagine how lonely she must have felt, not really fitting in to the place where she was born into. Like, this is her family, she's surrounded by so many people, but she doesn't fit in and nobody really cares. Yeah, so I'm excited to see where things go from here and see how she grows moving on. Okay, I finally finished the book. I will say when I got to about 50% of the way through, I wanted to take back what I said about Circe's exile being a blessing in disguise because things turned dark real quick. But by the end of the book, I found that despite all of the obstacles and the hardships that she faced each time, she bounced right back. And I found the way that she persevered despite all of that to be very inspiring. And she might not have known what she wanted, but she knew she wanted it and worked towards her goals that way. Especially when it came to her son, she went directly against Alcina and even broke her exile to get the poisonous tail of a giant stingray god that nobody else has done before. But like she did it anyway. She was determined to save her son, and I found it very admirable. And I also loved how, like, throughout this book, we follow Circe, but we see all sorts of different myths unfold from her perspective. It was interesting, because she's immortal. Like, these myths span over hundreds of years, and like these events happen centuries apart from each other. But always Circe is at the center of each of these myths. I thought it was interesting how at the end of the book, I would think back to earlier scenes and, they felt like they happened ages ago. I thought that was really well done. And that brings me to this book and the previous Song of Achilles. Like, they're just very well written stories, and I would definitely recommend them to anybody who's interested in them, especially if you love Greek mythology. I'm not super knowledgeable in the actual myths, so it's like I don't know like how accurate they are, but I don't think that that's necessary. This is still fiction, they are retellings. I think you are allowed artistic liberty. If these stories can like open the door for someone to explore Greek mythology on their own, like outside of these books, like I think that's a win all around. But yeah, I had a fun time reading these books. Like last month with all the moving, I didn't really have time to read a whole lot, and so now I'm getting back into the groove of reading more, and so it was nice. But yeah, so I would love to know if you've read either of these books, what you thought about them. Let me know in the comments. Also, if you have any like other recommendations, like they don't have to be mythology retellings. Any recommendations you may have, feel free to leave those in the comments as well. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and thank you for watching.